Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club, where we're reading the book entitled Jackson, A Modern Day Resurrection by Larren Cole. This is the true story of a 2-year-old boy, Jackson, who drowned in a pond on his family's property and had been dead for almost 30 minutes when he was pulled from the pond by his father, Larren, the author of the book. What follows is Jackson's miraculous resurrection and restoration to perfect health after his father screamed at God to do something, and he did. The book also addresses the often asked question, what happens when we die, providing both Jackson's answer and the comforting biblical commentary on the state of the dead. Death of young children by drowning is unfortunately a very common occurrence, and after Jackson's story was made public, Larren had the opportunity to provide counsel and Christian advice to many parents who had suffered such a loss. Permission to read this book has been granted by the author, and it is published by his family ministry, Desire Media. In our last reading, we covered chapters 1 and 2, where Larren took us back to how he met his wife, Mickey, at a mortuary, not exactly a pickup spot for singles, in Loma Linda, California, their subsequent marriage a few years later, the start of their family, their work, which took up all their time, leaving their kids to get to know their sitters more than them. Following the counsel found in the books Child Guidance and Country Living, they determined to leave the city, move to the country, and spend more time with their children. God blessed them, and they were offered a nice little home way out in Northern California, where they also found jobs in a not-so-nearby hospital in answer to their prayer and desire for him to work 4 days a week and Mickey to work 1 day a week. After a while, however, the free house they lived in was sold, and they found another place to rent called Short Walk Ranch with 37 acres and a pond. Ponds and little children don't go well together, but fortunately, the pond was out of sight of the house, and they never showed it to the kids. Meanwhile, on the job, Larren started a little work agency from home, providing staff for the hospital. This actually came about providentially when a nurse was dismissed because she had accumulated too many hours for her retirement plan. And Larren, seeing her distress, offered to have her work through his agency, which he had not yet started, but was only thinking about, but which became a reality there and then. Unexpectedly, after a few years there, he got a call from a lady who asked him if he still wanted to buy her 32-acre ranch. He had asked her before moving to Short Walk Ranch, but somehow she seemed not to have understood that he did want it at that time. As Larren always did, he presumed that God did not want to have it at that time, but wanted him to have it now, as if they had to be at this ranch for some unknown reason. Since they were planning now to move shortly, they decided to show the kids the pond, now letting them know what they had been protecting them from. Their family had now grown to 4 kids: Alexander, Madison, Jackson, and Kennedy, the baby girl. Dear readers, don't forget that you can purchase this book at desiremedia.org and read along with us as we pick up the story in chapter 3, entitled A Modern Day Resurrection. It was Monday, April 22nd, 2002, and Mickey was off to work, leaving me alone with the 4 kids. Things went fine all morning. After lunch, I sent the kids out to play while the baby and I did a little work in the office. After some time, I realized it was past time that I should go out and check on the kids. I scooped up the baby and went outside to see how things were going. I was immediately greeted by my injured 6-year-old Alex, who managed to bump his head on a satellite dish. While tending to the mild wound on his head, I noticed my 5-year-old daughter, Madison, standing by as if waiting patiently her turn to say something. "Excuse me," she said. "Just a minute, Madison. I'm almost done," I answered as I continued to dress Alex's wound. A minute or two later, Madison repeated, "Excuse me." This time, it was with a little more force. I finally stopped to listen. "What is it, Madison?" I asked. Jackson drowned," she said. Upon hearing that statement, I stopped what I was doing. Now she had my undivided attention. "What do you mean Jackson drowned?" I answered with a somewhat frantic tone. "Where is he?" I think I must have frightened Madison with my panicked tone of voice, because she was unable to answer me. At this point, I dropped everything and decided to investigate this. Hoping that she meant he was stuck in the mud by the creek bed again, I ran with the baby in my arms across the driveway, over the fence, down the hill, and into our field where the creek was. He wasn't there. Now I feared, because there was but one place where he could actually drown, and that was the pond. So then I sprinted down the creek to the middle of the field where the pond was. As I approached the pond and rounded the bulrushes surrounding it, my worst fears were realized. There, parked at the edge of the pond, I saw Jackson's little toy tractor. Scanning the scene before me, my eyes met the terrible reality. Way out in the middle of the pond was a still red figure. It was my 2-year-old Jackson, floating face down in his red sweatshirt. Without hesitation, I dropped the baby in the tall grass, ran full speed to the pond, and dove in. As I swam out to Jackson, in horror and very much on adrenaline mode, I realized how difficult it was to swim fully dressed and in boots. It was quite a struggle to stay afloat, let alone swim. I remember wishing that I had taken off my boots or at least my sweatshirt, but in my panic, I dared not waste time undressing. By the time I reached Jackson's body, I had spent most of my energy. I tried to raise his head out of the water, but that only made me sink under. Realizing that I had to get to shore immediately or I was in danger of drowning, I turned and swam back to the shore, dragging his lifeless body behind me under the surface of the water. That swim back to the shore seemed like it took an hour. As I neared the shore, my last bit of energy was waning. "Where's the ground?" I thought, as my feet searched below me for the hard surface of the shore. Then, when it seemed as though all my energy was exhausted, I finally felt the hard ground below me and was able to drag Jackson's body ashore and over to a dry area. For the next several moments, I laid there next to my son, completely exhausted. All alone in the quiet pavilion of the surrounding reeds and cattails, I couldn't move until my strength came back. finally recovered enough to move, I turned my attention to Jackson, but found that it was too late. There was no life in him. I tried to get some of the water out of his lungs, but still he had no pulse and no breath. In complete disparaging anguish, I sat there on the shore, holding the little boy I loved so dearly, who now was cold and pasty white. Jackson was dead. As I tried to contemplate what life would be like without him, another scene flashed into my mind. It was a story I had recently read about a lady named Ellen who found her little Willie drowned, and how she rolled him around and around to get water out of his lungs. And her story had a good ending, because Willie after a time revived. Not knowing what else to do, I rolled his limp body around and around. That did nothing but extract a small amount of water from his lungs. I soon gave this up, and again sank down beside him. In anguish, my mind went forward to life without him now. And what was I going to say to Mickey when she returned home from work? "How was your day, honey?" "Well, mine didn't go so good." I pictured the scene and how my wife's heart would be pierced with untold sorrow, as mine was already. At this time, Alex, my 6-year-old, came on the scene. As he stood there silently, taking this all in, I said to him, "Alex, he's dead." The trauma was so intense for him that he could say nothing. "He's gone, Alex," I repeated. And then with a loud voice, I finally turned to my Father in heaven. "Oh God, do something!" I yelled to God, which I've never done before. "Please, save him. I beg you, do something." I continued, but surely not expecting him to answer my irreverent yet sincere plea. Immediately after this desperate call for help, I looked at Jackson and noticed that a tiny bubble came out of his nose. And right at that moment, an inaudible voice spoke to me as clear as crystal, saying, "It's your turn now. Time to try CPR." With only a faint hope, I obeyed the voice. Only a few months prior, I had recertified in CPR and remembered how I kept asking my instructor, CC Toetulu, more questions about child CPR, and how I begged her to rehearse more in that area than with adult CPR. I had kept the class in session a little longer with all my extra questions, which, for some reason, I felt compelled to ask. Hearkening to the prompting of that little voice, I tilted Jackson's head back, closed off his nose, and breathed into his mouth. I followed this with 5 or 6 chest compressions, but all I got in return was an exhale. "Keep trying," the voice encouraged me. So again I breathed into his lifeless soul. Again, nothing happened except another exhale. So a third time, I breathed into his mouth. This time, I was rewarded with a much unexpected inhale, and then another. "He's alive!" I reported to Alex, almost in disbelief. But as he continued breathing, he suddenly went into the most terrible convulsions I'd ever seen. Every muscle in his body went into spasms. His entire body toned up, and his eyes rolled back in his head. He began to moan this terrible sounding moan, which continued to get worse and worse with each exhale. "Alex, bring the baby," I said to him as I ran, carrying Jackson all the way back to the house. Alex followed me, carrying the baby. And when we got there, I called 911. While Jackson lay on the living room floor, the 911 people guided me through some important steps. "Stay calm. The ambulance is on its way," they said. "Get him out of the wet clothes and try to warm his body," they continued. I managed to pull Jackson's pants and his diaper off, but the moaning persisted. That awful moaning brought to mind the children I used to treat in special hospitals that suffered from cerebral palsy and other drowning-related symptoms. Only Jackson's moaning seemed worse. "Is that your son I hear?" asked the 911 person. "Yes," I answered. After a moment of silence, the voice on the phone returned. "Sir, we have a change of plan. I want you to meet the ambulance on the road. Drive as fast as you can safely do so, and when you see the ambulance, pull over and flag them down." Jackson was in very bad condition, and by the sound of his moaning, the 911 people sensed that there was absolutely no time to be wasted. At this point, Mickey arrived home. For some reason, she decided to leave work a little early that day and to come home. When she pulled into the garage, she was greeted by Madison and Alex, who delivered the message: "Jackson drowned." Like me, when I first heard that phrase from Madison, Mickey thought they meant that he fell in the water and Dad got him out. But when she came in the house and could hear the moaning, she realized it must be more serious. "What happened?" she asked somewhat calmly. As she came closer to where we were on the living room floor, I answered her, "Mickey, I need you and the kids to get down on your knees and pray." Now, when Mickey discovered what was really going on, she dropped everything she was holding and broke down in horror. "Sir," the 911 operator said, "is that your wife now?" "Yes." "I want you to get in your car and leave now. I'll stay with you on the phone until the reception goes away." So then I picked Jackson up, went over to Mickey, who was indeed praying, and said, "Let's go, honey. We have to meet the ambulance quickly." We quickly loaded everyone into a Ford Expedition and headed towards Lakeview, which was about 25 miles away. After only about 5 miles into our drive, we met the ambulance, where they transferred Jackson onto their full-service unit and began trying to warm his body. I stayed with the EMTs in the ambulance while another person from the ambulance got into our truck and followed us. The EMTs cut the rest of Jackson's clothes off and began to evaluate him. I remember them reporting that Jackson's core temperature was far too low. As we sped along, upwards of 80+ miles per hour, they did all they could to stabilize him, but the moaning and the convulsing persisted. Upon arriving at the hospital, we were greeted by a host of doctors, nurses, volunteer workers, and police. What a crowd! In fact, for the last few miles of the ambulance ride, we had a multi-car police escort who drove before us, clearing traffic so that we could maintain our fast pace. In this small town, it seemed that every on-call emergency worker had responded to their emergency scanner and met us there at the hospital. As soon as we arrived at Lake District Hospital, Jackson was quickly transferred to the emergency room where the doctors took over. Together with a host of nurses and medical workers who packed inside of the emergency room, they worked feverishly, pumping his lungs and his stomach, which seemed to yield gallons of green water. For about an hour, they continued treating Jackson as I stood by his side in that crowded emergency room. But he wasn't improving. The convulsing and moaning persisted as bad as ever, and I was sure now that I would be visiting my beloved son in a children's hospital for the rest of his life. Many of the workers came up to me as I stood by my son and tried to comfort me. Some of them even congratulated me by saying, "Good job, Dad. Good save." But I didn't feel at all like a good father. As I stood there, still soaking wet, I felt that it was my neglect, for the most part, that had caused all this. Then I remembered the prayer I had at the pond only a few hours before. I heard that small voice again speak to my heart. It reminded me that God hears our pleas. It seemed to say, "When you call on me, I will hear you." Again, I turned to God. This time, on my knees and with confidence. "Oh God, please bring him back. Thank you for his life. But now hear me once more and restore my son back to health." I arose from this prayer feeling a sense of confidence that God had heard me this time. I then leaned over my son's convulsing body and said as I touched him, "Are you cold, Jackson?" Immediately, his body relaxed. The moaning stopped. His eyes rolled back from inside his head. He looked up at me and in a calm, quiet voice answered, "Yes." At that point, the joy that flooded my soul was indescribable. "My Jackson is back!" I exclaimed. The crowded emergency room erupted with cheering. The agony of my heart vanished instantly and was replaced with hope and assurance that this was the act of a loving Creator. No more convulsing and moaning. Jackson was much worn out, but he was alert and relaxed. In awe, I stood by that emergency room bed and beheld my son being instantly transformed back into the normal, little, healthy boy he once was. Meanwhile, Mickey was in another room where they had Madison. Madison was a bit hypothermic, since she too had obviously been in the water, so they had her in a bed warming up. As you can imagine, Mickey was beside herself with grief because of what was happening. She would practically beg any nurse who came into the room to pray with her for Jackson. Not sure what to do, some of the nurses did pray with her, realizing this mother needed lots of support at this moment. Finally, a nurse came running down the hall and into Madison's room. It was obvious she had an important message. "Your son just spoke," she reported. "Your son just spoke. It's a miracle." The agony of spirit in that room suddenly turned to joy and celebration. From one end of the hospital to the other, Mickey hugged and thanked all the nurses who had prayed with her. The end of chapter 3. Chapter 4. He's able. After a short time, they transferred Jackson and I to the intensive care unit and continued to work on him. They put me in a hospital gown and into bed alongside Jackson. I never even noticed, but during this whole time, I was soaking wet and shivering from cold and excitement. I didn't care about being cold or wet. All I could think about as I lay next to my son was that God had worked in him a complete recovery. This was confirmed as we administered a battery of sensory tests to see if he had all his faculties about him. We found that his eyesight was fine. His hearing was fine. He was able to eat the food they brought him, and all his body parts could feel and move just fine. He actually made a great patient for the nurses. Even though they kept poking him and drawing blood and rolling him this way and that, he never complained. "May I have your foot, honey?" the nurse would ask. Then Jackson would hold up his little foot for the nurse, who then jabbed it with a sharp needle. All the while, Jackson never balked or complained about any of the treatments they conducted. It's no wonder the staff seemed to fall in love with this cute little patient. "Thank you, sweetie," they'd say. "You're such a good little patient." With all 5 senses in perfect working order, I thought I should test his memory. I asked him to sing a hymn that we had recently taught him. The hymn was "Taking Time to Be Holy." He sang the entire first verse and chorus perfectly. But when he finished, without stopping, he broke into another song, which we had never taught him. "He's Able." I was shocked as I heard him sing this song in its entirety. "He's able, he's able. I know he's able. I know my Lord is able to carry me through. He healed the brokenhearted, and he set the captive free. He made the lame to walk again and caused the blind to see. He's able. He's able. I know he's able. I know my Lord is able to carry me through." "Where did you learn that song?" I asked him. "I don't know," he answered me as I lay next to him, listening in shock. As he sang this song that praises Jesus for his ability to restore the woes of the human body and soul, I thought to myself, I don't know where he learned that song, but how appropriate indeed. Jackson sang the song loud enough that others in the room could hear. little doubt was left as to who Jackson gave credit for his recovery. I think he made an impression on some of those who heard this. One such person was the evening nurse who was treating Jackson. As the evening progressed, we got to know her and found out she used to attend the very church that we now go to. More than 5 years ago, she stopped attending church for the same reasons many people leave. Somebody done them wrong. I said to her, "Well, I would like to officially invite you back to church." She paused a moment, then replied, "You know, since I left, you are the first person who has ever invited me back." I thought to myself, what a shame. How many wayward souls are out there just waiting for a friendly invitation to come back. We prayed for this talented nurse and did what we could to encourage her. There was another nurse there that night, which I noticed was purposely avoiding us. His name was Michael, and he was well aware of the situation by which Jackson was admitted into the hospital. I finally was able to talk with him late in the evening. "You know," he confided in me, "I asked that someone else treat your son this evening." "Why?" I asked. With difficulty, he answered, "Years ago, while I was in charge of taking care of my 2-year-old brother, he fell into a pool and drowned. I tried, but I wasn't able to save him. I've never been able to get over that traumatic experience in my life. Seeing your son there brought all the emotions of that terrible experience back to me. This brought a tear to my eye. As I talked with him, I knew just what he needed. I hoped to communicate to him that only Jesus could take this kind of burden from off his shoulders. Michael, the good news for you and others like you is that you may see your brother again on that great resurrection day. All you need to do is give your heart to Jesus, and he'll make it happen." Before visiting hours ended that evening, we had received numerous visitors. The news of Jackson's drowning had spread like wildfire throughout our neighborhood, and many of our neighbors came to the hospital. Jenny and Mark Romo, two of our close neighbors, came to visit and offered to take our other 3 kids home with them so Mickey could spend some time with Jackson. Although Mickey was relieved that Jackson had improved so miraculously, she still wasn't 100% sure that his condition would last. Not wanting her to get completely comfortable with Jackson's improved condition, the doctor told her that Jackson may experience a relapse in condition. Many times, when a drowning victim appears to be stable, said the doctor, they can without warning relapse and manifest some hidden neurological damage. After a few hours of visiting, mostly with all the visitors who came, Mickey went home while I spent the night in bed with Jackson at the hospital. As you might imagine, Mickey didn't sleep much that night. Thinking about what the doctor said, she was somewhat of a nervous wreck. Would he relapse, as the doctor suspected? Or had God, the great physician, overruled this possibility? Is it really possible to undo a miracle? the next morning revealed the true answers. Jackson and I did manage to get a little sleep that evening, and when the sun rose that morning, Jackson's spirit did also. He had a tremendous appetite now, and he was very talkative. I couldn't believe how this little boy, who just hours ago had been dead in my arms, was now so healthy and alert. I couldn't wait to tell Mickey, so I called her on the phone. "Good morning," I said with a voice revealing my true enthusiasm. Mickey's fears dissipated as she sensed happiness in my voice. "How is he? How is he?" was the first thing she said. "Well, let me have him tell you," I said, as I gave the phone to our little patient. Grabbing the phone, and with his happiest little voice, Jackson said, "Hi, Mama. I drowned." I could hear the relief in his mother's voice as she screamed triumphantly on the other end of the phone. "Oh, Jackson, Jesus saved you," she said. "I'll be right in to pick you up as soon as the doctors say you can come home." Mickey called everybody to tell them the good news. Jackson's grandfather, who was one of the concerned visitors last night, was so happy to hear the good news that he offered to pay the hospital bill. Mickey got all her kids ready as quick as she could and came in to pick us up. We had a glorious discharge from that hospital that morning. The doctor could find no neurological damage of any kind and no reason to hold him any longer. There was absolutely nothing the matter with him. If you were to ask me, I'd say that it was even better than before. When Mickey and the family arrived, she went straight for Jackson and embraced her little precious miracle child. As we left, we made a special effort to thank all the staff that had been so helpful. Jackson made many friends there during his short stay, and we wanted them to know how grateful we all were for the special treatment. And lastly, we wanted to say a special thank you to the doctor in charge who came out to discharge us. "I really didn't have much to do with his recovery," the doctor replied. "It wasn't me." The doctor then solemnly and reverently pointed his finger upward towards heaven, indicating to whom he thought the full credit rightfully belonged. The end of chapter 4 of Jackson, a modern day resurrection by Larren Cole.